You're now entering Red Zone with Chairman Rick Scott. Paid for by the NRSC, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. NRSC.org.
Hi, this is Rick Scott. I'm the chairman of the National Republican Central Committee, and you're at the Red Zone. Today, we're really honored to be speaking to a good friend, somebody that we all respect and admire for one, what he accomplished while he was Speaker, and then what he's accomplished since. He's not somebody that's quitting. He's somebody that is constantly figuring out how do we build a better America. And so I want to thank Speaker Newt Gingrich for being here today. Thanks for doing this. So we've got what some people would believe sort of a red wave, possibly, right? You went through this in 1994. You came up with the contract with America, and you did a couple things. One, you had a plan, you worked your plan, and then you were able to win, and then you put. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, it's an interesting phenomenon, and let me say, I actually think I'm working on a thing called the New American Majority Project, and we've done tons of polling starting in 2018. I think there's a red, white, and blue wave coming because I think a lot of people who used to be Democrats and are gradually, by gasoline prices, food prices, murder rates, open borders, they're gradually being forced out of the Democratic Party. So that there's a really interesting, much bigger than just Republican or even
if we talk to them.
Yeah.
If we talk to them, right?
If we talk to them, that's right. And I think that's part of what makes this an amazing year. What we did in 1994 started very simply. First of all, we stood on Ronald Reagan's shoulders because he had done a contract in 1980, and we had done a Capitol Steps event with Reagan in 1980. And as a result, they picked up 12 Senate seats, and for the first
people
time,
forget that.
Oh yes, it's lost in this. You know, he did so many things, but as a result of that, they picked up 12 Senate seats and controlled the Senate for the first time since 1954. Well, I was there. I actually helped put together the event as a freshman member of Congress. And so when it was our turn in 94, we really were standing on his shoulders and doing stuff. And there were a couple of basic principles. First, Reagan always appealed to everyone. He would always say, my fellow Republicans and those independents and Democrats who share our values. And he'd been an FDR Democrat. And as late as 1948, he had actually made commercials for Harry Truman and for Hubert Humphrey. So he really had a sense of red, white, and blue. Second, Reagan understood the power of policy, the power of ideas. So we were for welfare reform. Welfare reform, by the time we were done, was about a 91 or 92% issue. I mean, even people who were on welfare.
And people were better off afterwards.
Much better off. Well,
shocking. It's good policy.
The basic American instinct that the work ethic's important.
Right.
That turned out to be, it's really the driving thing behind it. And I really, by the way, the one person who actually has written about this, which I think is sort of funny, is Schumer. Schumer wrote a book about 2007 on politics and has a chapter on the contract with America. And he said correctly, the real goal was to radicalize the House Republican Party because my fear was that we could win a majority as a normal party and be surrounded by lobbyists and slide back into not doing anything. So I wanted everybody committed to a real program so that they would spend the first year actually doing things that got stuff done that was real and recognizing over time that wears down some. But the result was it also let us go to the American people and say, as we did in our advertising and in our speeches, we're telling you what we're going to do. If we don't keep our word, fire us. And in fact, we became the first re-elected Republican majority since 1928 because people concluded we were serious. And so our base stayed with us in a way that was really, really important. I always thought that the second election would be the hardest. That winning a majority was pretty amazing. But keeping the majority would be the real trick. And we did. We actually won. We won in 94 and we stayed in office till 2006. So that was impressive. A huge transition from the previous really 60 years.
By the way, I just finished the Thatcher book
Yes.
that you told me about, and I'm in the midst of the Reagan book you talked about, the education of Ronald Reagan. So yeah. I'm listening to the books you want me to read. So what's your biggest accomplishment as Speaker?
Well, I mean, we balanced the budget for 4 straight years, which is, I guess you'd have to say, the biggest accomplishment. When I left,
we're not
office,
doing that now, by the way.
No, I know. We should get back to it. That's one of the things we should do. And I mean, when we set out to do it, people thought it was impossible. We did it in 4 years, and then it was balanced for 4 years. And when I left office, Alan Greenspan, who was the chairman of the Federal Reserve, said publicly in testimony that they had a staff working on how would you manage the money supply if there was no federal debt. I think, I mean, I would argue the House and Senate Republicans ought to commit to get back to a balanced budget. And I think it lets you put in context how bad the spending is and to ask the question, why would you throw your money away on this junk when you could actually balance the budget? And without the pressure of a balanced budget, every politician has an incentive to spend more.
Right.
I mean, if it's all going to be spent anyway, why can't I have mine?
Yeah, might say ought to get its fair share.
Yeah.
Right.
When you went through this as a government, as a governor and before that as a businessman, there are real virtues to having to set priorities, make decisions, clean out things that don't work.
So in 8 years, we balanced the budget actually every year. States don't balance their budget; they borrow money. We actually paid off a third of state debt, and we cut taxes and fees 100 times. So it's all doable if you have the the will to do it. So talk about what's going to happen this November. What do you think is going to happen this November?
Well, I think unless something really dramatic changes, the Democrats could be in for the worst election since 1920, when they collapsed after Woodrow Wilson. And I say that because you're looking at Latinos, for example, where we're Republicans today, this is wild. Republicans today are stronger with Latinos or Hispanics than they are with graduate level whites. I mean, the transition in this country in the last 20 years is unbelievable. You look at what's happening among African Americans, and it's not common. I tell all of our candidates, the 2 key places to campaign are simple. Go to the gas station and then go to the grocery store.
Right.
Everybody walking out is going to be mad.
Right.
And just remind them, we had 1.4% inflation when Trump left. Gasoline was less than half the current price when Trump left. And this is because these policies, big government socialism, doesn't work. And I think
it's never worked.
It's never worked
anywhere.
That's right. I mean, so I think there's a real possibility that you're going to see a tidal wave, and tidal waves develop late. In '94, nobody could have suggested or would have suggested that we could beat Chairman Danny Rostenkowski in downtown Chicago, or we could beat Speaker Tom Foley in Spokane, Washington. But all of a sudden, what happens is, people who aren't paying much attention, don't think much about it, look up, okay, it's time to make a decision. And they go, none of this is working. We did a question recently. How important is it to restore the America that works? 87% believe it's not working and that it's important to restore them. Now, at 87%, that means the other side is swimming upstream. And frankly, this latest, which I find just astonishing, this latest Manchin-Schumer bill, which I call the tax increase, bigger IRS, greater government spending, more inflation bill. This verges on insanity.
Right.
I mean, you look at that and you wonder, are these people so totally, including Manchin?
They are. They're completely out of touch with where the American public is.
And so I think, I just wrote a piece urging every Republican candidate for both the House and Senate, challenge your opponent in August to defend the bill.
Right.
Say, I'm prepared to go and debate this one topic, that this bill's a disaster. And
That's
Herschel Walker just did that. And all of a sudden, his opponent, who's a preacher and an articulate guy and very confident, all of a sudden he said, no, I'm not going to debate that. Now, up until then, he's saying, Herschel won't debate. All of a sudden he said, I'm not debating, not that topic.
Because they can't.
He can't. And I think
they can't win.
I think you have an opportunity here, both in the House and the Senate, to pin them to who they really are.
Yeah. It's cutting Medicare spending without fixing drug prices.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you would never. There's ways to fix drug prices, and there's way to be more efficient clearly with Medicare, right? But not the way they're doing big tax increases. I mean, it's like Big Brother. Okay, so you're a prolific deal guy. I mean, idea guy, and probably a deal guy too.
I think you've been a successful deal guy. I'm just a former college
okay.
teacher.
So, Defeating Big Government Socialism, Saving America's Future by Newt Gingrich. If you want to get this book, you can text Newt to 55404. Newt 55404. So talk about this book and what you're trying to accomplish with this.
Yeah, what happened was it hit me that Biden was going to be so bad, and that the combination of Biden and Harris and Schumer and Pelosi were so totally out of touch with the American people that they were going to set up a chance to make the argument, not just that their policies don't work, but that their policies can't work. And the point you made earlier, the big government socialism doesn't work in Venezuela, didn't work in the Soviet Union, around the planet. It never works. It's an illusion of academics who want power.
Right.
But in fact, in the real world, it never works. And so I wanted to build.
First off, why do I want to run somebody else's life? Right. That's what I don't get about the Democrats. How did they get so smart that they want to tell us how to run our lives?
I don't think they get that smart. They get that egocentric.
I know. It just makes you mad.
Well, I think part of it is, and I think it comes out of the academic class that thinks, I read all these books, I have a PhD, and why aren't I at the center of power? I've always thought, in World War II, John Kenneth Galbraith, as a very young professor, was put in charge of wage and price controls for a large part of American industry. And so there he is, sitting in that office, having real power, and thinking that he is smarter than the market, and he's certainly smarter than all those entrepreneurs, and he knows he is because look how much power he has.
Right.
And I think
has to, right? Because he's there.
Those kind of experiences led an entire group of people to think, if only we were running things. Well, our experiences worldwide, when you let those people run things, it's a disaster.
My adopted dad had 6th grade education. My mom had 11th grade education, and they did not need government to tell them how to do anything. They could figure it out.
Right.
We didn't have much, but we weren't,
Well, so. You may remember Bill Buckley once said that if you had to choose between 6,000 citizens and the Harvard faculty, he'd always pick 6,000 citizens because they had a lot more sense than the Harvard faculty.
That's right. That's a good way of saying it.
Yeah.
All right. So talk about the Biden recession. What would you do if you had the power to stop this recession? As you said, when Trump left, it was 1.4%. Last month, it was 9.1% CPI. Right. So it's all bad.
Well, I mean, part of the point I make in the book, Defeating Big Government Socialism, what drives me crazy is we know what works, and they know what fails. So they choose fail.
Yeah. And keep doing it. They double down.
Yeah, I was a very young congressman when Reagan ran, and I worked with Jack Kemp and others to develop supply-side economics, which is a very simple theory. If you produce more goods and more services, you mop up the money supply in a positive way. If you focus on the demand side, which is what they're now doing, you have to crush demand, which increases unemployment.
Yeah.
And
which the poorest families lose their jobs.
Right.
People
and then, of course, you need a bigger government program to replace the lost income. And it's a negative cycle. And so the same thing is true, by the way, of crime. If you look at what Giuliani and Bratton did in New York, they turned around crime in New York in 2 years with a set of principles that work every time they're applied. And for some reason, liberals just hate them. So liberals believe, for example, that you really ought to put criminals back on the street. Well, if you
not in my neighborhood.
Well, no,
right?
I mean, that's one of the big differences between Florida
right.
and, say, New York. I mean, Florida does not have, to the best of my knowledge, any district attorneys who are committed to the idea that one.
Yeah, Soros has gotten 2 elected. Orlando and Tampa. Okay. And I was just talking to some of the law enforcement down in the Tampa area, and they said, it's just a bunch of stuff he's not enforcing. I took away, when I was governor, I took away the cases from the one in Orlando because she wouldn't enforce the law.
Yeah.
I mean, look, this is the law. Enforce the law. And I told everybody when I became governor, whether I like the law or not, we enforce the law.
That's right.
When I left, we were a 47-year low in our crime rate. Right? Enforcing the law, criminals are bad guys.
Yeah.
I want police to show up at my house if something bad happens.
That's right. Well, we ended up with, I just wrote some friends of mine turned out that New Orleans now has the highest per capita murder rate in the country. And I wrote two of my friends who live in New Orleans. I went to Tulane. I spent 3 years in New Orleans. And they said it's a nightmare. That you have a mayor who's anti-police. They have 1,600 police authorized. They have less than 1,000 on the job. Police are leaving because there's no support. And the city's now genuinely dangerous.
Yeah, we've got great sheriffs in our state, very good police chiefs in our state, but we have a couple, where you mess things up is you get state attorneys, and right. they don't enforce the law, and so right. And I don't know why Soros has gone out there and wants people to not enforce the law. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, he just wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal explaining that he thinks that justice is more important.
With no data. Well, I read the article. Yeah. There was no data in there to defend anything he said. Well,
look, I think when somebody murders somebody, justice is getting them off the street.
Right. Forever.
Yeah, forever.
Yeah.
It's just, and I don't understand Soros. I mean, Soros is a good example of the part of the left that hates America and wants to somehow tear down America.
Made all of his money through capitalism.
Right.
And then hates it.
Yeah, it's hard.
Wants to live in a safe neighborhood, probably has plenty of security in his neighborhood. Right. But the rest, people that can't afford it, we have to rely on, the police and the sheriffs. They don't, they trash them. Talk about China. What we have to do to defeat China. I think the most simple thing is stop buying anything made in China. Why do we buy anything made with that disgusting government?
Well, I think that we're drifting in that direction. It's the right way to go, the opposite of where Biden's going. But I did a book a couple of years ago on Trump versus China, and it was very sobering. I've been looking at China for a very long time. But when I really slowed down and went back and looked at what's happened, how it's happening, they're a very serious competitor. They have a huge problem. They peak out in population in this decade.
Right.
And then because of the one-child policy, they go straight down.
Fast.
By the end of the century, they may be about the number of people we are.
Yeah.
And India passes them this year as the largest country. So Xi Jinping, the dictator and head of the Chinese Communist Party, really faces a series of crises.
Right.
Because they're going to lose, their workforce is going to start shrinking. Somebody said one time, the Japanese were lucky because they got rich before they got old.
Mm-hmm.
The Chinese are going to get old before they get rich. And I think that's a very big problem for them.
So how would you compete against China? What are some of the things you would do?
Well, I did an entire chapter in my book on Trump versus China entitled It's Not China's Fault. And I said the number one thing is education. It's not our fault. It's not their fault that our teachers' unions have ruined the schools.
Right.
It's our fault. And I was part of 1983. Reagan issued a report on a nation at risk that said, if a foreign government did to our children what we're doing to them, we consider it an act of war.
Right.
1983.
How about sending all the fentanyl into the country that they're sending? 70,000 people died of fentanyl overdose just in the last 12 months.
Yeah, I think
it's disgusting.
Insisting to the Chinese that they close all the fentanyl factories would be an example. But I also think we need to rebuild the American military. We actually need reform. We have more than enough money spent badly by bureaucracies that are stunningly incompetent.
Right.
And I helped found the Military Reform Caucus back in 1981. And it still once again, we need a cycle of taking apart all the red tape. We need to be able to militarily in space and at sea and in the air in particular, balance them off. But I think we also, to your point, we should consciously think through every way in which we can help American industry and isolate Chinese industry. And this bill, this insane Manchin-Schumer bill, does just the opposite.
Right.
It raises taxes on American manufacturing and actually weakens our ability to compete with China.
Right. Why would you do that to yourself?
Well, I mean, why would you go to Saudi Arabia and not go to Texas?
Right.
I mean, if you want a lot more gas and oil, we could do that.
And by the way, the Texas oil is done more safely and clearly less expensively and creates American jobs.
Right.
And why? So did you grow up wanting to be dependent on your family? No, you grew up you want to be independent. We should be independent as a country.
That's right. And we can.
It's as simple as that. We should not be dependent on anybody.
In virtually every aspect, we are capable of a level of independence that enables us to be the leading country in the world.
Right.
And what you have now is a bureaucracy and an ideology. This is part of the point of the book on defeating big government socialism. They believe in things that do not work.
Right.
And they insist on not working.
And it's bad for people. It's bad for a family like mine growing up that struggles to make ends meet, that struggles for jobs. This is what hurts them.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for coming. Again, defeating big government socialism, saving America's future. Text Newt to 55404 to get a copy of this book. I just want to thank you because for decades, you've been a leading voice on new ideas and how to make sure we continue to build a country that we can all be proud of. So thanks for being here.
We all need to be citizens.
Yeah, that's right.
Great. Thank you
Thanks.
for what you're doing.
Thanks a lot.